Welcome inside the RX Muscle Studios in New York for another episode of Iron Debate, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm your host, Heath Faruqi. We are back for the first time after the Olympia and the post-Olympia tour. We bring back Iron Debate. We are going to be covering topics of the Olympia, of Dave's recent controversial video about the state of bodybuilding and bodybuilders. You will also have a chance to chime in with your questions. Anything on the Olympia, on the post-Olympia tour, anything that surprised you, please you, or whatever, it is all out for debate. As we bring in today's panel, first, the man they call Boss Number 2, who has been dying to get his Olympia thoughts off his chest. We call him John Romano. John, how you doing today?
What's happening, fellas? Everything good over there in New York?
Good to have you back on the airwaves, John of RX Television, and the other man, the man we call Technician, who did a phenomenal job with Dave all Olympia weekend long, providing excellent cutting-edge analysis as always, Chris Aceto. Chris, how you doing today?
It's great to be here with cutting edge analysis. Cutting edge analysis. There's people who dispute that, but I don't.
And then, of course, joining me here in studio, Dave Palumbo. Dave, this is our first Iron Debate after the Olympia, and so much of the topics going into the Olympia were about Kevin Levrone. It was Phil Heath who came out and took Sandows number 6, but it's the first chance for everybody to get their analysis off their chests.
All right, so John and I will have to eat crow and say, that we were wrong about Kevin Levrone. But you know what? In defense of him and I, we both made very uninformed decisions, seeing that we hadn't seen what he looked like, But he was the sentimental favorite, and I think he did add a tremendous amount of excitement to the Olympia weekend. But, what I want to debate here tonight, or at least talk about, is obviously the other guys, because the guys who actually had an impact in that top 5 and who went on to the European tour, and we got some crazy results from there. So I'm looking forward to these topics. I think they're very relevant, and I think that the fans out there who watch us want to know what our opinions are. Because after all, we have probably I hate to say it, but the best insights into the bodybuilding world of anyone out there, because we're actually not afraid to say what's on our mind.
With that, we get into our first topic of debate, and that is Phil Heath. Now, leading into the Olympia, as mentioned, so much of the conversation was about the return of Kevin Levrone and the fact that he's going to be entering into such a stacked lineup. And then you couple that with Phil Heath, to many's opinion, who didn't look his best over the last couple of years, but still managed to win. And there were many who thought that Big Ramy could sneak in this year and perhaps pull off that colossal first victory that so many people have long expected. That said, Phil Heath walked into Vegas this past September and put on an epic performance en route to his 6th straight Sandows. Before we get into whether or not he can now turn this into something where he breaks or ties Ronnie Coleman or Lee Haney's number 8, Chris, we're going to go to you first on this one. Your thoughts on Phil as opposed to his last 2 years. Is this the best Phil you've ever seen?
It's probably, it's the best Phil that's been out there, because it's the first time in eons where he's had a very muscular look, meaning when he just looks muscular. He looks very muscular in the back double bicep. He looks very muscular in the most muscular. Until somebody can trounce him in those 2 shots, he's not going to lose the show. And those are shots that he's used as his bread and butter the last 3 years, 2014, 2015. Those were shots that put away Kai. Those are shots that put away Rhoden, back double bicep, most muscular. And those were shots that put away the field this year. In addition, this year, he's had what he really has not had for 2 years. He's had a fabulous side chest, a very impressive back lat spread this year. A lot of depth and 3D-ness to it, which he's lacked the last couple of years. So can he When can he go on to win? You know, we're 340 days away from next year's show. He's the heavy favorite to win it again next year, and he shut up a lot of critics, and he did his job, and he did it in A+ fashion. I mean, I thought he was fantastic.
You obviously got to watch Phil Heath on the live stream, and since then, obviously, you've seen so many pictures. Your thoughts on Phil Heath as he looked winning Sandown number 6? John, do we have... This is an epic screenshot right here. John, do we have you? No, so Dave, we're going to go to you on this one. Your overall thoughts on Phil Heath and what he showed you this past September?
He showed us that he's not washed up and that he could come back better than ever. And maybe the fact that, he left Gifted Nutrition made him a little hungrier. He got the eye of the tiger back, and he realized, hey, I got to earn my keep here. And he brought back a look that was enabling him to dominate these lineups. Because let's face it, Phil was vulnerable the last 2 years, not because of the rest of the guys, but because of himself. He was beating himself, even though he didn't actually lose the show. He was actually, hurting himself by not coming in at his best. Now, at his best, he obviously proved that his best is still better than everyone else that's out there. Whether you want to believe that Shawn Rhoden could or should have beat him, I don't think that Rhoden deserved to beat him at the Olympia at all. I thought Big Ramy was huge, bigger than Phil for certain, but I didn't think he had the polish that Heath brought to the stage. And I think it was a well-deserved 6th victory. It's amazing when you think about it. I can't believe he's won 6 Olympias already. It went really fast. And, not many guys win 6. Cutler hasn't won 6. So, and he's only, I think, 34 years of age or 35 years of age. So he's definitely, got a lot of room to go still. And I don't know if there's anyone getting better. You got to remember, Rhoden and Dexter are all older, at this point. Ramy obviously is a younger guy. He's got potential to knock Phil off. But, who else is there that's going to, challenge this guy?
Well, Dave, let me ask you, because you mentioned Gifted Nutrition in particular. What about the fact that leading into the Olympia, so much of the talk was about Kevin Levrone, was about Big Ramy, was about anyone other than the man who came into the show winning 5 straight Olympia titles?
Well, I think if Phil would have looked last year like he looked this year, we would be talking about Phil easily repeating again. But I think what happened was Phil was off the last 2 years, and it kind of took the excitement away from the Olympia. So people don't know they didn't know what to do to get excited about this show. So what did they do? They latched on to the legend, Kevin Levrone. Here, finally, some excitement. Maybe Big Ramy working with Chris Aceto can win this title. He's the biggest guy out there at 300 pounds. We were looking for other storylines to enhance, the Olympia, because the Olympia is the Super Bowl. When you go to watch the Super Bowl, you're always looking for the newest story. Who's the new story? What's the latest controversy? And that's really what we were looking for. Going into next year's Olympia, the story is going to be, can Phil tie Arnold's, 7 wins? No one else has done that aside from Haney and Coleman, who have 8. So that's going to be the big story. No one's going to talk about anyone other than Phil Heath, and that's because Phil made such an impact at this year's show.
John, we have you now. Your thoughts on what you saw out of Phil Heath this past Olympia?
Well, obviously, this year he looked, incredible. So he deserved it by all accounts. However, having said that, it's like, to me, he shouldn't. If he looked like this year, then why did he win last year, the year before that, the year before that, and the year before that, when he looked like comparatively like crap? So, we could have had a much more exciting, competitive last few years if, Kai had won when he deserved it, when Dexter had won another one, Shawn Rhoden should have won last year. If we had that, then, he comes in this year looking like he did and took back his title. That would have been far more exciting than just, oh yeah, now he's got 6. Now he's tied Arnold. Is he going to go for Coleman? And so he's obviously, no matter what he looks like, he's going to win. So there's really, and we went through the same thing with Coleman. We went through the same thing with Haney. It just doesn't matter what they look like. They're going to win just if they show up. It's been a rare instance in this sport when a reigning Mr. Olympia did not win a whole slew of them. You can count them on one hand and have enough fingers left over to macrame a plant hanger. So I just feel that it's ridiculous that, you can have him come in and look like this, but forgive him the last 3 or 4 years when he looked like shit. So to me, it's taken a lot away from this victory where it would have been, wow, what an amazing comeback. He came back looking so amazing and won his title back. I would have liked that more, but, that's just me.
Chris, do we have you? Yes. All right, Chris, so let's ask the question that, we wanted to debate here, and that is, given – oh, he's not there. All right, so John, we'll go back to you on this one. In your opinion, can Phil Heath go about now that he has 6 in his pocket and he'll be going for Arnold's number 7 next year? Do you see him as capable, given what he's up against in the form, really, of Phil Heath and, obviously the challenge that Dexter Jackson poses? Chris, we have you back. We're talking about now whether or not Phil Heath can tie or break Ronnie Coleman and Lee Haney's 8 Olympia titles. So, John, let's go back to you on that one. What say you?
I say all he's got to do is show up. I mean, just like I just said, he's proven. It doesn't matter what he looks like. He'll win just by showing up. So as long as he shows up, he'll keep winning. And, there's this idea of, you got to knock out the champ. That's bullshit. The champ's been knocked out, and he still wins. So, yeah, Phil, show up. You'll win. So, you want 8, 10, 9, 15, 16, just show up. You get as many as you want.
Chris, let's go back to you on this one. Project the future competitors that are going to be pushing Phil for his, 7th and then potentially 8th. You think about Big Ramy. You think about the impressive William Bonac, Dallas McCarver, and some of the younger guys in the field. Given that, and given what we just saw this past weekend, do you see a scenario in which Phil ties or breaks Lee Haney's and Ronnie Coleman's 8 Olympia titles?
Well, the fact of the matter is the only person who can stop him now is either one, himself, right? Or 2, Ramy, because Dexter can't stop him. Rhoden's proven he can't stop him. None of the guys you mentioned can stop him. The only guy who can stop him is going to have to be, if Ramy can come in with the condition that he had. Ramy's got to be able to come in at the night show with 10 more pounds on top of that, and then it's a slam dunk for Ramy. You'll probably see that actually at the this European Olympia coming up. You'll see a preview of that, I'm sure. But Phil, Phil, this is what Phil has, that Phil has enough of all the wacky bells and whistles to continue to win. I mean, even when we say, oh, Phil was off 2 years in a row, he's like 5 meals away when he's off from being on. So he's hard to beat. And when he's on, he's still got like all the right tie-ins, the caps on the delts, the caps on the tricep, the crazy most muscular, the back double that looks tremendous. So, these other guys you meet, please, Dallas and Bonac, no way. Versus Phil, no, it's not going to happen. So that's why I say it's got to either be Ramy or it's got to be Phil himself. And, the Phil's got to be, juiced up after this show, because clearly his title, at least, was at risk. And clearly he over-delivered what he needed to deliver. So, he's not going to be worried this coming year on, all these other guys.
Dave, let's go to you for the final word on this one. And following the show, following Phil winning his 6th straight Sandow, so much of the immediate conversation, especially on our RX Muscle YouTube chat, on the forums, was really, look, Phil is going to dominate over the next few years. What we just saw in terms of his competition, no one's going to come close to him over the next few years. So there are some saying that he can even go up to 10 Sandows. What do you think about him reaching or breaking 8?
Well, Jay Cutler said it best when I interviewed him once about Phil, and he said, "Yeah, Phil break the record. Who's gonna stop him?" And I kind of was taken aback by that because it was a pretty bold statement by Jay, and that was, he felt that I didn't think that Phil was that dominant over everyone, and this was a couple years ago. Now Phil has, pushed past these guys. He's proven that he still got it. These guys are older than Phil. At this point in their 40s, they're not getting better. The Dexters and Rhoden. They may stay the same, but they're not going to get better. Phil is still improving, even if it's only by a little bit. I don't think they can catch him at this point. The problem is, and that we all forget, is that ace factor, that wild card that no one really expects, is things go wrong. Okay? People get injured. Look at Ronnie Coleman. We thought Ronnie Coleman was going to go for 20 wins. No one was even close to him. Cutler was kind of close, but not really. Coleman was doing enough every year to win, and then one year he just comes in and his back doesn't look right, and the next year his back is horrendous and he loses the title. So, as you get older, injuries creep up. Nagging little pains that really were just things you kind of dismissed now are affecting your training, and your physique suffers. So, assuming that Phil stays healthy, he'll probably break the record. If he doesn't stay healthy and he has things creeping up that we don't know about because he's not going to tell us this stuff, then he could become vulnerable. And there are guys that are like Ramy who are younger than him who can exploit that. Ramy is always there. Even if Phil manages to put him down the next 2 years, Ramy will be there in 3 years, and Phil will be older, and Ramy won't be as old, and Ramy will be that much more mature, and he'll have that much more quality muscle and separation. And I think that Chris is right. Ramy is probably his biggest threat, and he's lurking in the shadows. And he's bigger than Phil. He's got just as good a shape as Phil, if not better. And it's a matter of time. And we all, Steve Weinberger said this years ago, Ramy is a future Mr. Olympia as long as he still stays around. So when is he going to knock Phil off? Who knows? It's going to be dependent on how healthy Phil can stay.
That is going to end that first topic of debate. Again, you're watching Iron Debate on rxmuscle.com. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, for the first time ever, subscribe below. You're not going to miss any of our shows, segments, or updates. If you haven't subscribed to the Muscle Central Forum, sign up there. It's absolutely free, and you'll have full access to all of rxmuscle.com, including the contest gallery. We now go to our second topic of debate, and that is transitioning from Olympia to the post-Olympia tour, and more or less the mixed placings that we have. For example, Big Ramy comes in 4th at the Olympia. A couple of weeks later, he wins the Kuwait Pro. William Bonac comes in 5th at the Olympia. He then goes on to win 2 consecutive pro shows. It seemed as if there was a lot of jumbling of places with the same competitors over the span of 3 to 4 weeks. So the question is this, and John, we're going to go to you first on that. Is that the athlete week to week, how they look, their performance, and holding their particular shape? Or is this the judging panel from Olympia weekend to what you're going to see internationally, and who comprises that judging panel?
I actually think it's a combination of the two. Obviously, back in the day when there was the Grand Prix following the Olympia, when D'Amelio put it on, it was always exciting to see who was, winning in these separate countries. It was such a grind to get on that tour and, hold your condition and, ride the bus, the plane, and get your food. And, there were a lot of challenges in all of that. And I think some guys fare better, through traveling. Look, Bonac looked incredible. There's just no two ways about it. You want to pick nits. You got very few to pick off of him in the condition he showed up to, after the Olympia. So, and his 2 wins confirm it. But, it could have just as easily have gone a couple of other ways depending on the judging panel. So I think, it's a combination of which athlete can endure that kind of, holding their condition and hanging on, and what those international judges are looking for. And I think they're more free of the politics that allegedly surround, the sport here in America, because I seem to see those judges picking physiques that, I kind of agree with more than here.
What do you place more of the emphasis on as far as the mixed placings between the Olympia and some of the post-Olympia shows? Do you put it on the competitor and how they are week to week, or do you put that on the change in the judging panels, show to show, Olympia versus post-Olympia tour?
I think it's a change in judging panel, and I just think it's people like who they like, and that's not necessarily a negative. It's they like who they like, and just like I have physiques that I might think are ahead of this guy and that guy. Take Phil out of the equation, right? You go to Spain, and you have Ramy, you have Dexter, you have Bonac, and you have Rhoden. Close your eyes for a minute. They are so ridiculously different from one another. It's insane. Bonac is like the open. To me, he's closer to a Jose Raymond than anyone else. I mean, he's got a lot of muscle on a shorter body. Dexter's Dexter. You can't. It's hard to pick them apart. I guess Rhoden is a hybrid of size and condition, and Ramy is just like freaky at that show. So technically on paper, Ramy could win, Dexter could win, like on judges' paper, depending on the judges there and what they like. Rhoden could win. I don't think the Bonac could win, but that's another story. So it comes down to what the judges, like or prefer, and maybe what they're used to seeing. And that's why it's, I guess that result was controversial. Then you run over to Kuwait and it's different judges, and then you go to Prague and Bonac's winning. I think it's judging panels, what people like, and that's why when you see maybe a wrap up of a show by me, John, and Dave, or someone else, someone else's opinions may differ than ours. Of course, Bob Chicken Little says the judging was perfect from show to show. There wasn't even one placement out of place, and who won should have won, and who didn't win should not have won. I wouldn't agree with that at all. I would just say judges are different from country to country, and they have different opinions of, some people like, greater condition over size. I mean, I could break down the shows, which I did in the play-by-play, and I didn't agree with the judging from a personal standpoint. And even some of the results I struggle to make sense of, but that's bodybuilding judging. You throw out two highs, two lows, and then you get a mix of personal preferences in there. I think the Olympia was judged a hell of a lot better than the tour in terms of the way I see the show. I walk away from the Olympia and say, yeah, those are good results, right from pretty much first right down to 10th. But on the tour, you scratch your head, and you just roll with it, go into the next show.
Dave, let's go to you for the final word on this one. Olympia versus post-Olympia tour, what do you put the emphasis on in the mixed placings?
And I've said this before, and Chris and I have discussed this on the radio before. For some reason, whenever Steve Weinberg is the head judge, everything seems to always fall in the right place. We always agree with the decisions. Once in a blue moon, we don't agree. For some reason, when he's there, I don't know, I happen to think he's probably one of the best judges of all time, as far as a judge goes. He seems to be fair. He seems to know what's right, what looks good, and I agree with him. Now, that doesn't mean it's right, but Chris and I seem to always agree with the way he places people. When he's not there supervising, for some reason, we get crazy places. I'll give you, for instance, when the Arnold Asia, when Akeem Williams came off the win in Tampa, and he went to Arnold Asia, and he came in 9th place, okay, and he looked exactly the same, if not better. It was a non-supervised judging panel. Prague, I don't know if anyone was there. I think it was all European judges. I believe Kuwait might have been that way, or maybe not. But once again, when the judging panels are not consistent, okay, we get weird decisions. And for these, I looked at the pictures. I wasn't there. Chris probably could speak to this better. To me, the competitors all look pretty much the same. Dexter got better from the Olympia to the Arnold Europe, and I think that was a well-deserved victory. But then, you go to Kuwait, you go to Prague, and, these guys were pretty much the same. And all of a sudden, the placings were completely crazy. How Bonac goes from, placing, what was he, third, Chris, at the Arnold in Europe, to first in Prague. I don't know how that happens. And what was he, fourth in Kuwait or something?
I think he was fifth. Fifth in Kuwait.
So, I mean, I don't think he was as bad. I don't think he deserved fifth in Kuwait. He couldn't have been that bad. And he certainly didn't deserve first in Kuwait, in Prague. So these judging panels were all over the place. And it's frustrating for the competitors because, competitors take this stuff seriously. And when they win one show and then they come in fifth in another show, it's almost like a slap in the face, It's like, well, what the hell am I doing here? How do I place first in one show and fifth in another show and I look exactly the same? So to me, it is what it is. And notoriously, the European Tour has always been a chaotic environment, if that's a good word to use. Now, I know the Olympia, this year's first year Olympia Europe Mr. Olympia Europe is coming up in 2 weeks. And Chris will be out there, and I know we have almost the same Olympia lineup, minus Phil Heath.
Phil, right?
I'm guessing probably Steve Weinberger will be there. I hope he will. You'll probably see a much better judged show. I hope. But people ask, why doesn't Phil Heath do these post-Olympia shows? He can win all this money. You know why he doesn't do it? Because of the judging panels not being consistent. Imagine him going to Prague and losing to William Bonac. So I can understand why Mr. Olympia would be nervous going to these post-Olympia shows, given the fact that the judging is not consistent.
William Bonac, of course, winning the Prague Pro and the Nordic Pro for the second time in a row. Third topic of debate. Dave did a video a couple of weeks ago, and it was clearly labeled, "Are Bodybuilders Lazy?" And the topic of discussion came about, I'm not going to mention his name. It was another YouTube.
No, it was called "Why Bodybuilders Are Lazy."
Okay. The topic was brought about from another YouTube commentator who had a conversation with Rolly Winkler, and he has long beefed about the fact that bodybuilders don't get paid more. And again, there are various reasons, and that is a topic of conversation that I think can go a lot longer. But Dave made the video. And Dave, I'll let you explain a little bit, just because I feel as if there was a lot of misunderstanding about the nature of your video. Many thought you came out and flat out just called bodybuilders flat out lazy. And I'll let you explain first, and then I'll continue this topic.
Well, the guy you're talking about is Louis Marco. Louis Marco, who claims to be the most listened to person in bodybuilding. He declared himself that title. He's got the views to warrant it. Talk to Rolly Winkler because now he's friends with all the top bodybuilders somehow, and because they're all afraid that he's going to bash them, so they all kiss his ass a little bit. And he, I guess Rolly was complaining to him that he doesn't have a contract, that he's not making enough money, and he can't support his family. And Louis like, "Oh, poor Rolly," or whatever he calls him, Beep Bop, Boop Bop, or whatever his nickname for him is.
Boobunda.
We should the federation should be supporting him. I think I'm doing my George Farah impression.
I was gonna say that. Everybody talks like George.
And
Farah
I got sick of it because I'm sick of bodybuilders feeling entitled to money. And I went out there and I did a video saying that the reason bodybuilders are broke, and not all bodybuilders, why some bodybuilders are broke is because they're lazy. Because they have no problem selfishly going to the gym and eating their food and taking their supplements. But when it comes to going out there and marketing themselves, they don't want to be bothered. They think that people should just come and pay them for being big, freaky guys. And that's just not the case. And I was never that way. Jay Cutler was never lazy. I won't even mention, I had a $5,000 payday for a top bodybuilder. I'm not going to name who it is. He wouldn't drive an hour to go make the appearance for 2 hours to make $5,000. And he wasn't even preparing for anything. Or he was like 8 weeks out from the Olympia or something like that. And you know what? Jay Cutler's like, "I'll do it." Jay flew himself in. He didn't even want any money from the guy, and he flew himself into Bros vs. Pros, and he did the appearance at the gym and took pictures with everyone. And not only did he stay for 2 hours, he stayed for 8 hours. He was there the whole day. So, because Jay is a businessman. So I'm sick of everyone complaining, and then people took offense to it. Josh Lenardowitz said something on my Facebook about the fact that, oh, we're not lazy, and why would you say that? And I wasn't saying that bodybuilders are lazy people. I said they're lazy marketers of themselves, and that's how you make your money. It's not good enough just to be a huge, freaky bodybuilder. You got to be able to use that skill now to earn yourself a living, because you're not going to be competing for 30 years and making a living from it. So you better build yourself some sort of a business model around your physique. And I was just sick of hearing all the complaints that people feel like the organization should pay them, the supplement companies should pay them, the media sites should pay them. No. You should make a business for yourself so you're self-reliant on yourself and you don't have to worry about anyone else sending you a check. If people want to send you a check on top of that, then great, you got extra spending money. But I feel that all bodybuilders owe it to themselves and their families to use that skill that they've developed and nurtured to make themselves a living.
John, let's go to you on this one. Now that we clarify this a little bit, are bodybuilders, in your opinion, lazy marketers, as we will change this from just lazy to lazy marketers?
I think they're lazy in a work ethic sense outside of the gym as well. You know, and it's usually the younger guys, the ones that fall into the millennial generation, you know, the guys that are in their, you know, early 30s, late 20s, mid 20s. You know, these guys are, you know, part of this millennial generation that is self-entitled, lazy, is skillless. They're just people who think that, you know, the world owes them something. And if you have that underlying attitude going into this thing, the fact that you got to train your balls off and eat and all this other stuff to, you know, to be a bodybuilder kind of puts you within that attitude almost as an outlier in terms of overachieving. So the idea of, you know, getting a job, you know, on top of that and supporting yourself rather than, you know, where's my contract attitude, you know, it seems beneath them. You know, back in the day, remember, Arnold and Franco used to were bricklayers in Venice. They worked construction. I know a lot of guys, you know, old school bodybuilders who worked construction. They were bouncers, you know, doormen, you know, worked private security. They did all kinds of jobs, you know, just to make a living, you know, and some did things that were, you know, even worse than that. But and unfortunately, some of it's on film. But 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 look, I still respect that more than the guy who just says, hey, you know, I competed, I'm a pro, I deserve a check. You know, that's just not the case. I mean, even in the Olympics, you know, I have an Olympic athlete who's a client of mine, and she is, you know, has to maintain, you know, a certain amount of you know, performance in order to maintain her stipend. So, you know, these athletes are forced to work, and on top of that, you know, bring in some kind of extra income. I think it's ridiculous that, from a marketing standpoint, when a bodybuilder is almost fed something, you know, right out of your hand, here, go over here and make some money, go over here and do that, or you know. Apply yourself this way or that way to bring it to the next level. And they just flat out refuse because they think that because they're an IFBB pro or even a top ranked national competitor, that the world owes them a living. And I think that's horrible. And I think it's a pretty much a testament to this entire generation that's coming up that thinks that, you know, they're owed something.
Pose it to you in this respect, because one of the top comments that we got to those who disagreed with Dave's stance was drawing a parallel. Now, I'm not going to mention LeBron James because that's a silly comparison, but their argument is that these are the cream of the crop bodybuilders in a sport that is global, that they shouldn't have to do the extras to make it an honest living, never mind the, you know, lavish wealth that an NBA, NFL player would make. What do you say to that? In the sense that these are, yes, they're on the top of the bodybuilding game, that maybe they shouldn't have to do that? Or do you disagree with that premise altogether?
Don't call it professional bodybuilding. Call it like charity body. I mean, don't call it professional bodybuilding, period. My view is, I disagree with all of it. My view is you should be able to go to the Olympia or the Arnold and get 10th place at that show and take home a damn good check if you're going to call it professional bodybuilding. You know, the idea that Arnold laid bricks, doesn't hold up to the idea of there's 10,000 members of the amateur bodybuilding organization paying whatever they pay a year to belong. There's 3,000 booths at the Mr. Olympia competition. There's thousands of supplement companies that are a direct offshoot of not people who look muscular like Charles Atlas and wrestlers, of bodybuilders. I used to get Muscle and Fitness in the mail when it was Muscle Builder when I was a kid. And I would get all the magazines, and people would look at bodybuilding, and supplement companies, were built indirectly to some degree off the images and the dream of bodybuilders. I just don't buy the idea that bodybuilders have to go out and peddle T-shirts and shaker cups to be able to make a living. So if Josh Mlinarowicz shows up at the Olympia and he makes top 10, he should be able to go back to Australia with a big enough check where he doesn't have to do all that much to be able to supplement his income for the year. He should be able to call himself a professional. I mean, going back, when Arnold was competing, you can't compare it to those days. People weren't hawking a seat for $1,000 for a VIP ticket to go to the Olympia. So, there is money involved, and what is driving still the money at the Olympia weekend or the Ohio, the Arnold Classic in Ohio is bodybuilding. Go to the Arnold Classic in Ohio. It started with a bodybuilding show that sold out. It sold out in seconds, and then it sold out at higher ticket prices, and then they expanded it to a trade show. Then they added sports. They didn't do it the opposite way. They didn't start with cheerleading and bikini shows, and after that grew into trade shows from there and sold out bikini shows and cheerleading shows that they said, let's add a bodybuilding event. People still line up to see the Ramys, the Kai Greens, the Phil Heaths, the Jay Cutlers. Yes, we have, and we have the new growing classic physique, which is another indirect, somehow money bonanza. If you can't make top 10 in the Olympia, if you can't make a living by being top 10 in the Olympia without an Instagram and Facebook account, I don't care. Yeah, it's 2016. You got to be socially savvy, blah, blah, blah. Then it's not a profession, because those things are extras, and there's no sport where where you call yourself a professional and you're top 10 in the world and you're expected to go out and sell socks that have your name on it on Instagram.
John, I want to bring the same exact premise to you. What do you say to that argument that the cream of the crop in bodybuilding, that, again, if you're finishing in the top 10 of the Olympia, that you should essentially be afforded an honest living wage and not having to do the extras? What do you say to what Chris just responded to that question with?
That I totally agree with. It's the Joe Blow pro who turned pro at the or just squeaked by getting his pro card because he won the light heavyweight, because he won the lightweights at the Junior USA or however he got it. That's the guy that doesn't deserve the year-long stipend. Top 10 in the Olympia, hell yeah. I mean, that top 15 should get it. I mean, you should get, if you're at the Olympia level, 10th place should be $100,000. You should not have to work the entire next year to be in the Olympia if you've been top 10. And they certainly have the money to do it. So I completely agree with that. It's the outliers. It's the guys who think just because they're a pro or just because they're chasing this dream that somebody owes them a living. That's what I disagree with. And I further disagree with the fact that these are the guys who are so hesitant about promoting themselves in social media and hustling and drumming up business and getting some money coming in by virtue of their own creativity and ingenuity. They think that they're owed something, and that's the attitude that I am vehemently against.
On this one, again, the comparison, it may be a premature one to say, all right, well, top of this, basketball heap, the football heap, baseball, hockey, they're taken care of. They're getting an honest living. Where how again the argument goes back to the top class of bodybuilders. How do they get taken care of in that respect?
Look, bodybuilding is not a sport. Chris said, "Is it a sport?" It's not a sport. It's a beauty pageant. We know that already. We love it. We're passionate about it. We do it. I've competed. We've all competed. That's what it is. It's the general public, while they might watch bodybuilding because it's a spectacle, don't want to look like bodybuilders. They want to be able to dunk a basketball like LeBron James. They want to be able to throw a football like Tom Brady. They want to be able to run the 100 meters like Usain Bolt. That's what they want. That's why these guys make big bucks, because people are willing to pay, for Nike stuff that have Jordan's names on them or Usain Bolt's on the sprinting shoes. They don't care about bodybuilders. They like bodybuilding. The general public we like WWE wrestling. Like people it's a spectacle sport, and until bodybuilding can somehow find a niche for itself in the general population of TV where it would be a spectacle sport, people are not going to want to aspire to be like bodybuilders. If you can put it in the public eye where you have reality shows and you have the Mr. Olympia is on, you have bodybuilding shows on like you have WWE Wrestling Raw, you're not going to get big-time sponsors behind these bodybuilders. It's not going to happen because it's not a look that most people want to look like. Once again, they might appreciate it, but most people don't want to look like it. Now, guys like me and fans of this show would love to look like that because that's what we're into, but there's not enough of us, unfortunately. There's not enough of us. We have 63,000 subscribers now on the YouTube channel, and by the way, if you like the programming, subscribe. Shameless plug. But we don't have 63 million, like WWE does. So obviously it's a limited population of people that are willing to spend their money on bodybuilding, and so there's not as much money there. Bodybuilders know this going into the sport. I knew there wasn't a lot of money in the sport. Okay, that's why I had to find another niche for myself to be able to earn money from the sport I love. And that's all I'm saying about bodybuilders. If bodybuilders want to live off the $20,000 prize money they make or whatever they make for the year, then that's great. But that's not realistic, So if you want to make money, you got to get out there and hustle your butt off because there's money in the industry. There's not money on stage. I made more money when I got off stage than I ever made on stage. Okay, and that's a fact. Okay, I bet you Dexter Jackson makes a lot. Well, he makes good money on stage because he's still competing. But he became a promoter of events. He helps people with contest prep. Him and his wife, have a whole team of athletes they work with. He understands it. He gets it. When bodybuilding's over, he wants to make money for himself. And that was my point. My point is that we shouldn't feel like Species Nutrition has to give the athletes money or out of obligation. Because if I did that, I would go be out of business. So once again, I believe that not all of them, a lot of the athletes out there just don't want to bust their ass.
That is going to do it for the debate portion of the show. Now we're going to take your questions. So if you're watching us on our YouTube channel, you can ask your questions on the chat box on the right-hand side of the video player. And our producer, Johnny Styles, is sending questions along. So, again, we talked about Phil Heath winning his 6th straight Sandow, and the topic of debate was, again, whether he's going to be now challenging Arnold for that 7th, and then eventually Lee Haney and Ronnie Coleman's number 8. Well, one of the questions, and Chris will go to you, I believe John Romano had to go and tend to a conference call, but Chris will go to you on this one. Who had the better arms, Ronnie Coleman or Phil Heath? Or do we not have Chris either? Oh, we got.
We don't hear him.
Chris, we have you?
Phil's got better arms on his frame. They take over his whole entire body, right? I mean, Phil's arms and delts, at least this year, that's why he's Mr. Olympia. I mean, his arms and delts are insane, dude. I mean, Coleman had crazy arms too, but he had, different bodies. But I would have to say, on his own frame, Phil. If you see Phil like in a gym in a tank top, I mean, your eyes go immediately to biceps, triceps, delts.
Dave, let's go to you on this one. Better arms, Phil Heath or Ronnie Coleman in his prime?
Ronnie's arms were so ridiculous when I saw him in person. I remember we were eating once. We guest posed at a show together, which was an honor for me. It was in Fargo, North Dakota, and we were sitting in Outback, and Ronnie had a sleeveless shirt on, and I had pretty big arms. You know, I probably had 22 and a half, 23-inch arms. Ronnie's arms were laying on the table. They were so big that I was looking at him leaning over and eating his food, and I realized that his arm was bigger than his head. Now, his arm wasn't bigger than my head. I have a big head. But Ronnie's got a little head. Ronnie's arm was bigger than his head. So I'm going to say this. Ronnie Coleman, probably 80% of his arm was his bicep, okay? Which is weird because most people have a bigger tricep. Phil Heath's tricep is bigger than his bicep. And that's, proportionally speaking, that's how your arm should look. So who had bigger biceps? Ronnie Coleman had way better biceps than Phil Heath. Who had a better complete arm? Maybe Phil Heath, because his triceps were just ridiculous. Ronnie had like no triceps. I don't even know how his arm looked the way it did. He had these little thin triceps on this enormous bicep. So proportionally speaking, I'd say Phil had better arms, but I think Ronnie's freak factor-wise, his biceps were just ridiculous back in the day.
One of our viewers asked, should the challenge round, been a while since we heard that phrase, come back to the Olympia or even the Arnold? Chris, go to you first in this one.
The challenge round.
Explain.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know what? The challenge round will just lead to like social media wars because someone will win one pose, front double bicep, and they'll be it.
Dave,
you know, the judges can't stand it. The judges wouldn't be able to stand it because you can have guys, maybe not this year, but you can show pictures of maybe, you know, challenge round, so beaten Phil on a certain shot, Kai or whoever it may be, and God, to me it wasn't exciting. So it was like, you know, it feels like pageantry. The only part of the Mr. Olympia that's just filled with total unadulterated excitement is before the prejudging starts, when the guys come out and the all-important first call-out. That is the most exciting 45 minutes of bodybuilding for the year. Other than that, it can get boring. And adding the posing round, the posing round, that's boring. The challenge round, you know, even more boring as far as I'm concerned.
Dave, you want to give a quick primer to those watching and wondering what exactly the challenge round is?
The challenge round was developed to try to add some excitement to the Olympia. It was a good idea. What it would be was each bodybuilder could challenge another bodybuilder, you know, pose for pose, and they scored you based on who would win. So like Shawn Rhoden could challenge, if he thought he had better legs than one of the competitors, he could be like, I challenge Kevin Levrone to a leg pose, a quad pose, or something like that. And then they would score them. And then, so each bodybuilder challenged one person. So like Gustavo Bedell made infamy by beating Ronnie. He won the challenge round by basically challenging Ronnie Coleman to a side tricep, which was his best pose, and Ronnie's side
2 years
tricep
in a row. He won it twice.
Yeah, it was the worst pose. So it really came down to strategy. You had to strategically know who to challenge and who you were better than in each pose. And in a sense, Gustavo was a good strategist, what's the word? Strategist, thank you, Sid. He was a great strategist because he knew exactly what poses to hit to beat each guy, and they would score it live. It was exciting. It was a great idea. But then, you know, when Mr. Olympia doesn't win the challenge round, you know, it kind of sucks because, you know, you want to see Mr. Olympia win the challenge round if he's going to win and then go on to win the Olympia. But it should have been like a day before. Like instead of the press conference, they should do a challenge round at the press conference. That would have been probably more exciting if they would do it there. But I guess people did away with it because it kind of took away the luster of the thing. This is the one I guess they're showing right now. They're showing Gustavo Bedell go against Gunther Schlierkamp here. And Triple H was hosting it. But if you had freaky body parts, you could win this thing. Guys like Dexter would get slaughtered in this because Dexter just had such perfect balance, but he wasn't better than anyone.
He was a perfect balance.
Dexter hated the challenge round.
Dexter could win the show and come out like fourth in the challenge round.
Yeah, Marcus Rule loved the challenge round. All the guys with the freaky, like Big Ramy would probably win the challenge round.
He'd win all the challenge rounds.
Because who could beat him for quads? What body part would he lose? That's a better question.
Next question.
Only.
None. He would lose nothing.
So next year, of course, The Rock making the big announcement on the stage that next year's Olympia is going to be broadcast by his production team on CBS Sports Network. To clarify, that's CBS Sports Network, not CBS as in Channel 2 here in New York. But the question is, which categories, which divisions do you think are going to make that broadcast? Chris, let's go to you first on this one.
What's going to make the broadcast?
Yes.
The men's bodybuilding and the classic physique. End of story.
All right. Dave,
Classic bodybuilding.
They'll probably put the bikini in there too. I would say.
No, Dave. Let me tell you what they're going to try to do, because they're going to be wrong. Is they're going to get the board shorts, which they're going to get the pageantry of the men's. What is it called? Men's physique.
physique. Yeah.
What's the board shorts?
Men's
Okay,
physique.
so it should be men's bodybuilding. They'll probably do a snippet of the 212s, which will piss off all the 212 guys. They'll feature classic bodybuilding, which will piss off the 212 guys. And then they'll somehow put in too much time for the men's physique, because they're gonna get lost in the idea that it's pageantry, that it's mainstream or something. And they may be right, but I think they're wrong.
Well, I mean, let's take it a step further. Dave, do you see a scenario in which it's only bodybuilding?
It should be only bodybuilding. I think that would be the way to go. Test the waters. Don't give people too many things to look at. I think that's the mistake. Let's see if they like pure, unadulterated bodybuilding as Arnold Schwarzenegger competed in, 30 years ago, and see how the public responds to that. I sometimes think if you give them less, you're better off. Let them ask for more. Hey, we want more. What else are they doing at the Mr. Olympia? Is there any women? And then next year, then you give them more. I don't know if they're going to just edit together a whole collage of like an hour special or something like that, which is what they were planning on doing a couple years ago on NBC Sports. It never happened. But I don't know what the plan is. I would like to just see an Olympia special. Like you remember they used to do, Chris, they would do on Wide World of Sports. Like they would do the Olympia. It would be like 6 months after the Olympia, but they would do like Arnold had it somehow managed to make it happen. He got it on a Wide World of Sports, and they would do like a Mr. Olympia. It would be like 15, 20 minutes or something like that. And they would show the posing routines of the top guys, and they would talk about them. And it was a quick hit and run, but it was nice that it was on mainstream TV.
Johnny, do we have any more questions from the chat room? Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Iron Debate. Special thanks to Chris Aceto, John Romano, as always. We'll be back next week. A lot more to break down. We're also going to be coming back with an episode of Iron Rage Versus. If you haven't checked out Versus, go now to our YouTube channel. Check it out. It's a show where Dave pits bodybuilder versus bodybuilder, gives his analysis. The first episode was between Big Ramy and Dexter Jackson. Got rave reviews, so you're going to want to check that out. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Sign up on the Muscle Central Forum on rxmuscle.com. For Dave Palumbo and Johnny Styles, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.